Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is an exciting one because it's like the 30th of January and I got my reading goal done. I didn't fail on the first month and document it embarrassingly to YouTube. So I will review these books, but just a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, these came in the mail. Can't express how happy I am that the geese video did as well as it did. I'm so happy that all of you guys out there like geese and that a ton of geese fans who I don't know personally came to my channel to comment on it, even though it was my second video. Speaking of that, this channel has reached 10 subscribers, and I know it's only 10, but I honestly expected this channel to grow a lot slower just because it kind of came out of nowhere. Time to get to the books. So in case you're new here, I'm doing a 3-book-a-month series where I read 3 books a month. My first book of January was Open Water by Caleb Zuma Nelson, and this end of the month, I read 2 books at once, Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas. Now, I decided to do the tandem read. As you can see, there are tabs on top, courtesy of my sister. These are 2 books that take place at the same time, so you can read them in tandem, get through 2 books at once while not wasting a ton of time. And first off, I wanted to start with an About the Author section. So Sarah J. Maas is an author based in New York City. She started writing the Throne of Glass series, which are what these 2 books are part of, when she was 16 years old. They didn't get traditionally published until she was around 26. She's a very well-known name in the fantasy community. Now, fantasy isn't my main cup of tea, but my sister Jasmine did recommend me these books as a fantasy series to get into fantasy. Sarah J. Maas is one of the most divisive authors that I've seen online. All of the books in the entire series that I've read so far have either been 5 stars, people writing essays about how much they love the books, or 1 star and people writing essays about how much they hate these books. I'm not part of the 1-star crowd, but I'm also not part of the 5-star crowd. I'm going to start out with what I loved about the books, what I liked about the books, all that jazz, and then I'm going to move on to what I didn't like or the cons about the books. So if you had any criticism about the book, then stick around because we might share the same opinion. First of all, I wanted to address the question of should you read each book one at a time or should you do the tandem read where you read them both? Now, there are tabs online. My sister had already put these tabs in the book. I personally recommend either one depending on what type of reader you are. When I was recommended this series by my sister and her friend, they recommended that I do the tandem read because they did the tandem read and they liked it because Empire of Storms ended off on a pretty cliffhangery note, and going from a big book like this to a big book as well that restarts at the beginning can be pretty demotivating. Another reason is because it makes the time go by a little bit faster. Like, you read a section and then you read a section, and it seems like you're progressing through both books at a pretty rapid rate. I mean, after one reading session, I had already gotten to section 25. One of the main drawbacks to the tandem read is that it is a lot of book. Going from one book that you have to read to another book that you have to read can feel a lot easier than having to trudge through these 2 books at once. They are both 600 plus pages. So if you can handle being left on a cliffhanger for a while, especially because this book tends to be more liked, you can slam through this one because this one is a bit shorter. So honestly, just decide for yourself, I think. Okay, now it's time for what I did like about Empire of Storms. I liked a lot about this book, mainly the story. My sister told me that the story in this book is a lot crazier compared to most of the other books. I think that the story being crazy definitely helps this book because it is a very long read. It's around 680, 690 pages, so it can get kind of crazy. And there are a lot of sections like this one that I can fit my finger in between. And having stuff that's constantly going on and not having a boring book does help with this one. And this is also a drawback that I see to the tandem read, because this one I think is a lot more chill and more boring. So I think that Empire of Storms is just a nice little rapid read if you read it just as one unit. Another thing that I liked about this book is there is a lot of lore that is dropped about this. This series can get sort of confusing, especially if you take a break in between reading like I did. And so a lot of lore was mentioned in this book that I felt was quite needed. This book kind of has an adventurous nature to it, and I think that that's pretty good because a lot of the other books, especially like Air of Fire, where they kind of stay in one spot, this makes it feel a lot more moving about. And it is kind of a breath of fresh air in the series, I will say. Overall, I did like a lot about this book, and it was a fun read, but there are some parts of it that kind of made me roll my eyes, and this is where we get to the things that I did not like about Empire of Storms. I want to start off by saying I didn't really like Empire of Storms as much as I liked Tower of Dawn. Kale, who's the main character of Tower of Dawn, is probably my favorite character in the series. I don't know if that's a red flag. A lot of people online don't like Kale, but I definitely felt a lot of bias towards Tower of Dawn. And even my sister said that Tower of Dawn would be my book, and low key it might have been, but this is not about Tower of Dawn right now. We're talking about Empire of Storms. First criticism I have of this book is the way the characters are written. I feel like she kind of flipped the script for a lot of characters, and so many of them have devolved into sort of the same type of character. The main character, Aelin, Rowan, Adian, like Dorian, even at some points, those are the main ones that I've kind of seen criticism with that I actually agree with. I feel like a lot of them have the personality of being a witty, smart aleck, and like nonchalant character who doesn't care what other people think. And I think it worked very well with the main character, Aelin, when it was the first few books, because she was young and arrogant, but she's older now. She's a queen. And so you need to look at that. And maybe that's a flaw of her character, but does it need to be a flaw of every other character? I just think that because of the way that she wrote the characters in this book, there are a lot of times that she repeats herself in the writing, and this has kind of been a problem with a lot of her other books is her writing style in certain ways. Like there are a lot of times where a person in this book will give another character a suggestion on what they should do, and a lot of times it's a logical and smart suggestion, and the only thing that the person responds with is, last time I checked, you don't give me orders, or I don't take orders from you. A lot of the arrogance from a lot of the characters shines through a lot more in this book because they're all together. I'm not a big fan of that part. Again, in the sort of writing department, obviously we can talk about the length of this book. I feel like there's a lot of parts that could have just been straight cut out, like a lot of the romantic scenes. This is technically a romantasy series, but I wouldn't even call it that. There's not a lot of romance other than the fact that people get into relationships. I feel like overall there haven't been a lot of romantic style of literature elements to this series, but I feel like she turned it up a notch in this one, and it kind of just feels out of place, especially with the main two characters. They are very horny in this book, even despite impending doom. If they cut that part out, it would remove a lot of bloat and keep the story a lot more coherent while keeping in some of the more lighthearted romantic aspects for a YA novel. Okay, that's it for my thoughts on Empire of Storms. Overall, I rated this 3 stars on Goodreads. I would rate it 3.5, but I decided to move it down because 4 stars just didn't feel right. I wanted to do a section where I go over some common complaints or praises that I hear about this that I actually disagree with. A complaint I saw about Empire of Storms is that Kale and Nezrin weren't in it. And that criticism was kind of stupid to me because the next book in the series is entirely about them. I've seen people write reviews even after Tower of Dawn was released saying that. So it's not like they saw this release and were like, what's going on? Another criticism that I see about these series, this whole series, not even just these books, is that everyone tends to get into relationships with each other, and it seems like not a single character is single. Now, while I said this isn't a romantasy series in my mind, it is to the general public's mind, I guess. There are some people who agree with me that this isn't romantasy, but it makes sense for characters to get together when there are romance elements in the book. The reason I bring that up is because I feel like a lot of these pairings were necessary, even the ones that seemed very minor and didn't really matter to the story actually did have some elements that helped the story. For example, Dorian does some flirting with a certain character. I'm not trying to spoil it. And a lot of people said that they didn't like that, but I thought it made perfect sense because of his past relationships in this series. Okay, that wraps up the Empire of Storms section of this book. Now it's time to move on to what I liked about Tower of Dawn. I liked this one more than Empire of Storms. I feel like this story was written as more a fiction story in a fantasy world. And I don't know if that makes sense, but my favorite genre is just kind of classic fiction. I'm a big fan of like Catcher in the Rye, 1984, those kind of original books. I don't know if that's a red flag either. I've heard that it is. But my point is Tower of Dawn has a lot of fantastical elements, and of course they are in a fantasy world and they focus on world building, but it's not like they're going on some crazy fantasy adventure, and it's not like the whole book is spent fighting dragons or whatever. There are obviously some confrontations in this book, but I feel like it was more just a story and an arc of a few characters like Nezrin Kill and Irene, who gets introduced in this book. I obviously have complaints about the length, but I didn't really mind reading a book this long because I liked the characters, I liked what they were going through, I thought it was interesting, and I thought that the overall arc progressed at a pretty good pace. Lots of people say that you can just skip this book if you don't like Kale, but I think that that's stupid because this is a whole set of characters that you are just missing out on the development on. You need to commit to a series if you're going to read all of it, at least in my mind. I think that Tower of Dawn has parts where Kale reflects on how he treated Aelin, how he treated other people, how he feels about his life, and it does give greater context to the overall series regarding the main characters of the story. And overall, I think it's more of like a mental and psychological arc rather than a physical and adventurous arc. And the stuff that Kale overcomes, even though at the end it's kind of iffy, it's still a good book in my opinion. Now, the stuff that I didn't like kind of shares with the stuff that I didn't like about Empire of Storms. First of all, I think way too many characters are introduced in this book, and barely any of them feel important enough, even if they are. A lot of them are introduced, a lot of them have lines, but not all of them add a ton to the story. And I feel like it just makes so that you have a lot of difficult names to remember rather than characters that mean something to the story. Another thing that I don't like is that she repeats herself, as I said in the Empire of Storm section, and it adds unnecessary bloat. I understand the romance arcs in this book. I think they make more sense than they did in Empire of Storms, to be fully honest. But there's a lot of scenes that feel kind of pointless, and there's a lot of lines where she repeats herself. Like if someone needs more time, she'll be like, "Time. She needed more time." Or like, "Too far. He went too far." And that stuff just kind of adds up and adds bloat, those little traits. And I think that every time I saw one of those, I was just like, "Bro, stop doing that." That's obviously just a writing style and preferences thing. A lot of people have complained about Irene, especially near the start of this book. And I get why you would complain. She is kind of mean, but she's mean for a very valid reason. And without spoiling too much, I think the way that she comes around, because everyone knows she will, is more heartwarming than a lot of other redemption arcs. Overall, many people think that this book was unnecessary, and low key, there is a world where you just combine both books into one and just refrain from mentioning certain aspects of each book. But I think that it's good that she did both books. For someone who likes Kale, this book was amazing because I got to see him succeed in certain things, fail in others, and overcome certain mental battles. Overall, I quite like this book. I gave it 4 stars. That's kind of a dead set rating, no real half stars here. Um, some common criticisms that I see about this book are obviously the length. I feel like the length criticisms of this book are much more warranted than they are for Empire of Storms. There's a lot that happens in Empire of Storms, and there are a lot of chapters in Tower of Dawn that I think were just straight up useless. So I do kind of agree with that, but also it is a pretty complex arc, so the length is a bit more justified. Another thing a lot of people say is that all of the characters in this book are just boring. And I kind of agree when it comes to Nezrin, but I think that the two main characters in this book, Kale and Irene sort of is becomes a main character later in the story. I think that they're pretty interesting, especially when they talk with each other. And I think that those characters aren't boring, but a lot of the side plots with Nezrin are just super skippable and they seem a lot more necessary. Okay, I think that that was it for both books. There's a lot to say about these books. I know that I said negative stuff about them, but I still do recommend this series, especially if you're just getting into fantasy, because the first three or so books of the series kind of give you a taste, and then it tells you if you're ready for something like this. I do want to say that before you read these books, don't look at reviews about the books because I made that mistake with Air of Fire and it kind of ended up swaying my opinion on Air of Fire a lot more. For books like this, where it's very divisive in a community, I would say definitely read them first and then see what other people have to say after you've already formed your own opinion. Because when you formed your own opinion and you see what other people say, you can be like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, that's kind of right. But when you read reviews beforehand and someone says that a character is annoying, you're going to be looking for annoying traits of that character. Have your own opinions is basically my big advice, especially for this series, because a lot of people love it and a lot of people really do not like it. But that marks the end of this review. I hope you guys liked it. I think I thought it out a bit more than I did with Open Water. Yeah, these were my second and third books of January. And I'm super excited to get February started. I am kind of scared because obviously I am going to be starting with Kingdom of Ash, obviously. It's the final book in the series. I'm excited to read it. Not so excited about the length. It's like almost 1,000 pages long. But yeah, definitely going to be fun. Going to have to read it quick because there's only 28 days in February. Oh my God, I'm so scared. Let me know if there's anything that you want to see me add to these reviews. If there's a more detailed description of and about the author section that you would like, then just let me know. And if you like these books, I will be covering Kingdom of Ash, and I will be doing an entire series review book by book. So definitely follow along for that if you are a fan of Sarah J. Maas or the Throne of Glass series at all. And let me know if you shared any of the criticisms or praises that I had for these books. Let me know what you think because I want to see your guys' opinions. Thank you so much. Have a great one. Keep reading.